is pumping. It is pumping right now. It is up over 7% on the day at the time of recording. 7%. For context, the S&P 500 returns anywhere from 6 to 11%. Most stocks, you were given the expectation that they'll go up in terms of US dollars, roughly 6 to 8% in a year. And Bitcoin's up 7% today, this morning. This is the chart right here that shows that. If I can pull it up here, this is Bitcoin in terms of dollars, and this is dollars in terms of Bitcoin. And what you see is that they will do the exact opposite. Now, why are they doing the exact opposite? It's because this is an exchange rate. In the same way that you price houses in terms of dollars, in the same way you price oil in terms of gold, or the same way you price computer chips in terms of pencils, like this one here, it's the same thing with the US dollar and Bitcoin. Inherently, when the dollar goes up, or Bitcoin goes down, and inherently when Bitcoin goes up, the dollar goes down. They cannot both go up simultaneously in terms of each other. And so therefore I ask the question, did Bitcoin pump today 7.2% as of now, or did the dollar crash 6.6% today? Yes, both of these are true in terms of each other. However, which is more true? Which is more accurate? That is the question that I'm going to be answering in today's video. It is equally true on a numerical perspective to say Bitcoin's up over 7% on the day in terms of dollars, as well as saying the dollar is down over 6% in terms of Bitcoin. But the question is, which frame of reference is more true? And the answer to that is that it is which system, which monetary system is more immutable. Now, what does immutable mean? It's about it being unchanging. Is the supply, is the equation that governs the monetary policy of that network changing more one way or another? Now, why is this happening? This is happening because of the ETF. There was a ruling today with the SEC and Grayscale about the ETF in Bitcoin's favor / Grayscale's favor. The SEC has lost. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit has paved the way for Bitcoin exchange traded funds, ETFs. And of course, this has lots of speculation of Bitcoin price in terms of US dollars going up. Here's a chart on CNBC. This looks like, yeah, CNBC of Bitcoin going up in terms of US dollars, although this is specifically Grayscale Trust, GBTC. Now, does it matter? Yes, it does. Is it a big deal? Yes, it is. Is it that surprising? No, it's absolutely not that surprising. Fidelity, BlackRock, and many other institutions are also vying for ETF approval following Grayscale. And we're probably going to see that. It might take months, might take years. I'm not going to speculate on that because ultimately it's futile to speculate on politicians and lawyers what they're going to decide to do. But one way or another, it's probably going to happen because it's a logical thing to do. And when that happens, Bitcoin's price will continue to go up. It's up 7% today. It'll probably just keep going up in the future with volatility. There are times it will go down. And the reason for that is getting back to the more fundamental why I was talking about before. And that is that the ledger that is more immutable, the ledger that has a fixed supply, will go up in value compared to the one that doesn't. If we think of it, instead of measuring value, we think of it like measuring length. We can use an example of, if I measure things in terms of pencils again, if I measure things in terms of pencils or in terms of fingers, I will get a certain length. But if someone else measures something in something that's more immutable, something that is less changing, something that is less at the whim of human distortion, you know, I can intentionally change the length of a pencil to meet my desired outcome. If I want to measure something as being quote unquote longer, I just make my pencil shorter, and now, oh, voila, it's longer. Or it can be unintentional. I can't change the length of my finger unless I, you know, use some scissors and cut it off. But I can't intentionally change it. And so in the same way with political currency, with fiat currency, it doesn't matter if it's malicious or not. It doesn't matter if you're intentionally distorting the supply of currency units within that system, or you're unintentionally distorting the supply of currency units in the system. Either way, obviously the malicious one's going to cause more damage, but either way, the end result is the same. That the way of measuring things that doesn't require that is inherently going to be more valuable. If we take the speed of light, for example, and the meter stick originally used to be based on the circumference of the Earth. Mathematicians hundreds of years ago wanted to make a global standard unit of measuring length that was based on a fixed distance, a fixed equation of the circumference of the Earth, because to them at the time, that was the most immutable thing they had. What was the largest thing that was the least changing and the most stable they could possibly measure? It was the circumference of the Earth. And they got pretty close. We have since updated that to something that's even more immutable. It's something that we could measure even more accurately, the speed of light. Because see, with Earth as a sphere, certain parts of the Earth have a different circumference than other parts. Even though they're minuscule on a human scale, if you want the most immutable way of measuring length, the speed of light is infinitely better at measuring it. And so that's why 1 meter is precisely one fraction of the speed of light, because the speed of light is 299,792,458 meters per second, precisely, no decimal place. We have created this kind of equation, this kind of mathematical system of measuring length that we call the metric system, that's based upon this underlying principle that 1 meter stick, roughly 3 feet here in America, but that 1 meter stick is precisely equivalent to 1 out of 299,792,458. It's precisely that. And so therefore that has been the dominant way of measuring things in the entire world. America and a couple other countries can afford to be a little different because we have big guns and we like to make our own rules. But it's true that for the vast majority of the world, they prefer the metric system. It is the first time we had a way of measuring length that immutable, that unchanging, theoretically forever. No one is ever going to be able to change the speed of light, as far as we can tell. And nobody's going to be able to change the math that we are using to communicate the length in terms of speed of light. You can't change that fraction, 1 out of 299 million. You can't change that. It's just a number. You can ban it, but I can still use it. And so in the same way, it's true with Bitcoin. Like, you can ban Bitcoin, but it's just a series of ones and zeros. It's just an equation. In the same way that the meter stick is just a fraction of something that's immutable, Bitcoin is just an equation of math that happens to come out to roughly 21 million Bitcoins, or 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis. And so why is it more accurate, in my opinion, to say that the dollar is falling in terms of Bitcoin, like this chart shows right here? Why do I think that that's the better answer? Why do I think that's the more accurate answer? It's because I personally am of the opinion that Bitcoin is, over the long term, a much more predictable, much more stable way of communicating value across space and time. I do not think the dollar does this. I do not think the peso does this. In the same way that I don't think a pencil does this, so that in the same way I don't think a finger does this, or in the same way I don't think that a tree does this, or a rock, or anything. Most things are not immutable in the same way the speed of light is. And so ultimately, I think that that is the dominant way we'll measure things in the future. Obviously, is crossing the metaphor over to Bitcoin. I believe over time, more and more people will say, I do not want to trust centralized authorities, banks, lobbyists, politicians, governments, whomever, lawyers. I do not want to trust human beings to say, we will cap money supply at this and we'll never raise it or lower it. Like, why would you trust them to do that? Of course they're going to raise it, because the incentive is so high, they are inevitably going to. Instead, people will say, I'm going to trust this computer algorithm out there that's so decentralized, so hard to change, it would take such an incomprehensible energy expenditure to edit, that says this is the cap of the monetary units within this network. And in order for you to change that, you're going to have to create your own network, by which will be inferior. I think people are going to prefer Bitcoin over the long term for that reason. And therefore, even though it is correct to both say Bitcoin is pumping today and the dollar is crashing today, I think it is more correct to say that Bitcoin is pumping today. And it's important to emphasize that, because in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, what's going to happen is that Bitcoin is just going to start going up and up and up and up and up in terms of the US dollar. And people will begin to eventually realize what I'm saying. And they will no longer be excited about, oh, look, Bitcoin went up 10% today in US dollars. They will think, wait a minute, my dollars just fell 10% today. When people start denominating things in terms of Bitcoin instead of denominating things in terms of dollars, and they understand why they're denominating things in terms of Bitcoin instead of dollars, that's when they begin to realize that Bitcoin pumps are actually not that exciting, but in many ways are terrifying, because you're not watching a speculative asset go up exponentially. You're watching the world's largest reserve currencies fall exponentially. That's really what you're watching. And this has been a continued trend for over a decade now, decade and a half now, the dollar and every other fiat currency, every pencil and finger in the world has continually gone down in relative value against this meter stick. And it's probably going to do so in the future. And people within fiat, people within political currency, people within your pencil manufacturers are going to continue to tell you that meter stick is made up. It's who can measure the speed of light? It's just photons. Photons don't have mass. This pencil is real. The pencil has mass. You can touch it. You can feel it. Stick with pencils. Buy my pencils. Okay, this is not this is not logical because it's not the pencil. It's not the analog nature of the pencil itself which gives it its value. It's the immutability of that length which gives a unit of measure its value. And the same thing is true with Bitcoin. And so you're going to hear in coming years as Bitcoin goes up to 30,000 again. It's not quite at 30,000 US dollars, but it'll go up to 30,000, and then 40,000, 60,000, 100,000, 500,000, 1 million, 10 million, 20 million, 50 million, 100 million. It'll just keep going up. And as it keeps going up, these pencil manufacturers, the political currency people, will continue to tell you that this is a speculative asset that is going up on a bunch of hot air, and it's super high risk. And you'll have to watch this video in the future and determine for yourself whether you agree with that. And I'm telling you right now, Bitcoin's not even at $30,000, and it's the lower risk form of money in the proper time horizon because it is the first and only immutable monetary system we have had to date. Thousands of people have tried to destroy it. They've tried to inflate it. They've tried to debase it. They've tried to attack it. And thus far, the only attempts that got any traction completely fell over 99.8, 99.7% or so, and are jokes. So you can determine risk however you want. For me, I don't like risk. I don't want to take excessive risk. I'm an ambitious person. I have a big work ethic, but I don't want to take unnecessary risk. And frankly, I don't want to expose myself to political currencies that can fall 6% in a single day. That's just me. I don't want to be exposed to that. And probably in the future, it will continue to fall 6% daily, eventually, at some point. And so you have to ask yourself, like, okay, you could love the US dollar. You could hold the US dollar. You could be 100% all in the US dollar. But why? Why would you go all in on magic internet money? Why would you go all in on that? I don't understand. Why would you not just cash out and take your profits and stick it in a real way of measuring value, a real equation? Like, why are you trusting paper? Your stocks are corporate paper. Your bonds are political paper. Your currency is political paper. It's all just paper. Why are you trusting made up promises from people that you don't trust anyway, that you already know are insolvent? And frankly, a lot of them are warmongers and spread an incredible amount of misinformation. Why would you trust them to cap an equation based on promise backed by the power of a gun when you could just trust an equation? I don't understand. But albeit most people don't make their decisions based on math. Most people don't know how fast the speed of light is. Most people don't know where we get the length of a meter stick. And likewise, when Bitcoin starts going up exponentially, hyperbolically, in terms of US dollars, they won't understand why it's happening. They'll just be so freaked out, so panicked, and in so much pain from the theft that has occurred from their pencil manufacturers that they'll just buy Bitcoin, and they won't understand why Bitcoin's better. They won't get it, but they will transition in the same way we adopted the meter stick, in the same way we adopted the internet, in the same way we adopted the electric grid. And most people don't have any idea how any of those things work. Same thing here. Everyone will adopt it. It's just they won't adopt it until the pain and the chaos has gotten so dramatic that they'd rather take the pain of jumping into something new, or the discomfort of jumping into something new to avoid the pain of remaining in what's hurting them. So anyway, it's really something to think about. I don't know if you're watching this today when Bitcoin is 27,000, or in the future when Bitcoin's 300,000 or 30 million, but that's something to think about. Inherently, most people cannot make out of a bank run financially whole. And likewise, most people cannot sell their stock in pencil companies when the pencil company, for a profit or without a loss, when the pencil company is already insolvent, because it is already insolvent.